Hey guys, welcome to a beautiful, beautiful day. I, of course, am Dr. Julie Two Moon. I wanted to jump in here real quick and have a little conversation about migraines. I talk to so many women, and I will say that migraines is a really common reason why people are experiencing a less than ideal living experience. And it's a serious condition because it makes such an impact on our life, but it's bigger than that. Because, if you have migraines, so some of you may experience this, you know that when a migraine happens, now your whole day is altered, right? Because it's hard to think, it's hard to be kind, it's hard to be creative. Sometimes it's hard to sleep. I know I have in the past had migraines, and, guys, my history of migraines included trips to the ER to be given, big pain medicine. So I get it. It's a big thing. But too much of the time, we become really used to it. So I've talked to women who, have a history of 15 migraines a month, maybe sometimes just 2 a week, but 2 a week is horrible. 1 a week is horrible. I mean, experiencing a migraine even 3 times a year, guys, is an unacceptable number of serious headaches. Now, on top of that, if you're a person who starts being given the abortive therapies and daily pain medicines in some case, or you're just turning to Tylenol, ibuprofen, those over-the-counter things, those have serious consequences. I mean, we're seeing now that the damage done to the liver and the hormonal system from taking those over-the-counter pain meds is serious business and may even really be exacerbating our risk of things like Alzheimer's. And from what I've seen, it also exacerbates our risk for cancer and even other serious conditions like Parkinson's. And so it's really important that we understand that migraines are a symptom. They are a really significant symptom of exacerbated stress response gone unchecked in the body. Now, they happen a lot in women. There's either two camps. Like there's the camp of women who have them their whole reproductive life, and as soon as they start to go through menopause, the migraines back off. And then there's other women who experience them in an ongoing fashion. Both of those are actually hugely hormonally related, which also still is the stress response. So what happens is, that unremitting stress changes your biology. It changes how your cells work. It creates a whole lot of liver congestion. In Chinese medicine, chronic headache patterns have a huge relationship to how the liver functions and the function of the gallbladder network. And so often these things are going missed because they're being addressed, as just like surface syndrome. So a lot of times you go to a doc and they will say, gosh, we really don't know the reason. Hey, why don't you avoid, some of these, they'll give you a little sheet like the migraine trigger foods. They'll say, oh, why don't you avoid these? And, don't do aged cheeses, try to avoid the sulfates in wine. And they kind of send you off. Oh, you could take some magnesium. I mean, it's this dismissive, unfortunate response to something that's so significant, especially when, excuse me, especially when the cause there is an inflammatory process. But then again, medicine doesn't really understand inflammation. All they know how to do is suppress it, so it shouldn't really surprise us, but it's an inflammatory reaction to the unremitting stress, raising a couple of things. So stress automatically raises estrogen, and it's the inflammatory type of estrogen. So that's one consequence. And that is a huge trigger for migraines, because then you end up with a lot of high tissue estrogen. And that doesn't mean you have a lot of estrogen in your blood. That can be a big discrepancy, because a lot of times people with high tissue estrogen actually test as having low estrogen. So unfortunately, then that can also lead docs to say, oh, you're low in estrogen, that's why you're having migraines. Now, another facet can be a whole lot of backlog of toxicity, like I was talking about. The liver gets totally bombarded every single day. And so when we have a migraine pattern, you can get that backlog because that stress level is saying so high, the liver does not detoxify in a stressed out state. And then that compromises things. Then you have a toxic buildup, and then your body doesn't have the capacity to move that. Now that makes a big impact on your gut, which has another relationship to migraines, because if you're not moving the bile, you're going to end up with dysbiosis, and then you're going to start to have more and more food sensitivities. And then some of you may have experienced, with the migraine pattern, you have to start avoiding all kinds of foods, because if you have them, then you have the headache. But the fact is that the origin is still back at the stress response, and the impact that stress response has had on the gut and on the liver and on the nervous system, creating this pattern. And then it's the further disruption to hormones, which gets even worse the more that the gut is impacted by the stress response, because then we get toxic estrogens accumulating in the intestines, which furthers the responsiveness to foods. I mean, you guys can see it starts to get big quick, right? Now, on top of all that, a lot of people, will say, well, on top of that, all my stress goes to my shoulders and my neck, right? So again, it's that stress response creating muscle contraction because we're not feeling our feelings. We're not letting ourselves let things go, because in this world, like, we've really been taught, like, there's no time for that. Or we're taught to, like, analyze everything to death, when in fact, so much of what's needed is an actual letting go, like, feel those feelings when they happen and then let them go so that your biology can be free to do things. Now, all of this big scenario that I was just talking about, which also has impacts on thyroid. Thyroid has a huge place in migraine presentation because, even just from a brain perspective, your brain uses way more thyroid hormone than most other parts of your body. And if the balance there is off because you can't convert T4 to T3, because the liver's congested, or because you're not eating the right balance of carbohydrates, then that can be another source of big inflammation in the brain. So there's that. There's the relationship to adrenal. We could go into blood sugar, because as soon as you have an unremitting stress response, the blood sugar gets deregulated. So there's all of these things. And yet too often what I see is that people are like, okay, let's pound in some magnesium, let's pound in some B vitamins. And then the biggest one that really irks me is, let's start giving you hormones. Please, you guys, do not let someone give you hormones as their solution to your migraine problem, because here's what's going to happen. A, it might reduce them for a period of time, but you're suppressing the headache. That's all you're doing. You're using suppressive therapy and you're not changing the cell biology. And if you do, and what's going to happen next is that if you ever want to come off those hormones, you're going to have to relive the headache pattern. And the odds are, as it's been progressing in the background, it's going to be 1,000 times worse than it was before. And now you're going to have a bigger thing to heal. Migraines are a symptom of cells that are not maintaining equilibrium. They are a symptom of deregulation in all kinds of systems, not just the hormonal system. So it is essential that it get addressed as that. Otherwise, you're going to linger with headaches forever. And on top of it, they give you hormones. You haven't changed the congestion in the liver. In fact, you've added to it. You haven't changed the balance in the gut. You haven't changed the stress response. You haven't changed the body's ability to self-regulate. You have not improved the immune system. It is not changing the pattern. Hormones are sometimes needed. Never estrogen. Never estrogen. And I could do a whole video series on that. Never, 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 never estrogen. However, sometimes progesterone is needed, sometimes pregnenolone. Very rarely DHEA for women turns to estrogen way too quickly. Big, big, big problems. And sometimes thyroid hormone. Those are the hormones that are sometimes needed. But if you give hormones to someone without correcting the imbalances at the cell, and the energy needs of the cell, and the carbohydrate needs of the cell, and the mineral needs of the cell, and you haven't put in a nutrient-dense diet, you haven't put in rest, you haven't put in self-care, you haven't changed the way you're processing your thoughts, you haven't changed your relationship to your body, guys, it won't frickin' matter. It's not gonna change your health status to just plug the holes with some hormones and call it good. This is one of the biggest things, and migraines are no different. The thing is that over my 20 years in medicine, migraines actually are something that I go, oh, migraines, we can solve that. And too often, this is not the way you guys are being told it works. And so you're suffering endlessly with a pattern that is totally solvable. It's actually one that for most people is way more surface and way more malleable. The bigger patterns sit so much deeper. So, if you have migraines, you need to start asking yourself some questions. You need to ask, A, how long have I had this pattern? Okay, so do I know that there are food triggers? If so, have my food triggers expanded over the years? Because that's a great sign that your gut is being further compromised by stress. If you've had them since you were a teenager, then the odds are there is a hormonal connection, but we can have inherited deficiencies in stress-based metabolism that start even in childhood, and not even, and if we add on top of that childhood trauma, stressful households in childhood, not having the right nutrient balance in childhood, not having good sleep habits, all of those things, they count as stressors. I think this is also what gets missed. People say, I don't think I've had a stressful life, but if you didn't have the best nutrition growing up, your sleep quality was off, your household was stressful, and people around you had emotional issues, then if you went to grad school or you went to even undergrad, I'm sorry to tell you, but you've had more stress than your fair share. That's just a fact. I've seen it over and over. So you've got all these references for where the stress has built in your body. So you need to check in with that and kind of gauge yourself, like, where do I sit on that spectrum? And then gauge, like, what has ever worked? And you might say, well, nothing has ever worked. And that's definitely a time to start having someone dive in deeper. I mean, this is what I do. Like, what are the patterns? Why are the cells doing that? What's the relationship to detoxification, nervous system, hormonal systems, gut? How is it all interplaying? And then set in motion a compassionate way for your cells to get that recovery. Because remember, every single health challenge is a point where we've become disconnected, where our cells no longer feel nourished, they don't feel safe, they don't feel like they can do self-recovery. And that's what healing is. It's reestablishing that balance. So, check in with that. How long have you been at it? What have you tried? Have you looked at the balance of hormonal systems as they interrelate to each other? So not just like thyroid or estrogen or progesterone, but like how it's all relating. Have you looked at how stress is impacting your liver? I do not recommend you go do some kind of cleanse or detox because most of you do not have the cell energy to facilitate that in a big way, but I'm just saying toxicity is going to be an issue. That being said, again, I do not under any circumstances advocate like going to the health food store, your chiropractor's office, your naturopath's office and asking for a liver detox. But the liver is going to have to be compassionately encouraged to release and detoxify. To do that, your cell energy has to be raised. So what kind of dietary practices are you practicing? Dietary practices are you practicing? Are you consuming carbohydrates? If so, are you consuming ones that work for you? Are you consuming good quality fats? Did you take all the polyunsaturated fats out of your diet? Are you eating good quality proteins? Are you sleeping enough? Are you taking downtime? Do you spend time outside? How much sunlight are you getting? How much time are you spending on a screen? How much time are you spending staring at a phone? These all matter because the fact is that migraines are entirely solvable. They're not a pattern you have to stick with, and they are just a symptom of deeper things. And so if you solve the migraine pattern, you'll be solving 10 things with it if it's done the right way. But I just had to jump on because knowing that there are people out there just being given a whole bunch of hormones for a problem that's entirely solvable and relates to the rest of the body is maddening to me. So, you don't have to get stuck in that rut. You guys, it's entirely healable. You can heal. You don't have to be stuck just trying to manage symptoms. You really can heal. If migraines are one of your issues and you want to talk about it, set up time with us. That's what we do. It's one of the things we do, right? But it is imperative that we're always looking to the root because your body's trying to tell you something and ignoring it is not going to serve you. All right, guys, blessings.